If you're looking to hire a designer for your online business, Upwork is a great place to start. You can post a job that you want done, and then interested designers will apply for it. You can also search designers that are on Upwork and invite them to apply to your project. When I first started out as a freelance designer, Upwork was where I found my first clients. I had a lot of good projects on Upwork, but I also had a lot of bad projects that I regretted taking on. So with that experience, I'll give you tips on how to hire a good designer for your business to increase your chances of success. Let's start out with your job post. You want to find the Goldilocks zone with your job post. You want to give enough detail so a designer will know if they're a fit, but you also don't want to overwhelm your applicants. Here is an example of not enough detail. Need a logo design for my business. Sure, you'll get applicants, but it's not likely they'll be good. When I was starting out on Upwork, I would apply to any job just to get some experience to show up on my profile. But as I gained experience and credibility on Upwork, I would automatically reject any post that didn't give me details, such as the example I just gave. On the other end of the spectrum, I would also reject any post that was too detailed. So if it's 5 full paragraphs, that's too much text. Unless it's for a really big project that needs that much explanation, but normally just a few paragraphs are fine. And you don't even have to write paragraphs either. You can just do a bullet list, and that's great. And speaking of formatting, make sure to use proper grammar and punctuation in your job post. That should go without saying, but you'd be surprised at the lack of effort some people put into their posts. So now you know what not to do, let's shift and talk about what to do in your job posts. Explain what you need. A logo, a brochure, website, whatever it is. Give a brief overview of the project, give a brief overview of your company, and be sure to include what industry you work in. If you have a visual example of either your current branding or something you have as inspiration for your current project, be sure to include this in your job post. Because even though you're the one hiring a designer, the designers are also reviewing you to decide if they want to work with you. I think a common misconception about graphic designers is that they just do anything. And sure, some do. I did when I first started out. I did a lot of different projects because I was trying to figure out what I liked. But experienced designers typically have specific industries or types of design that they do, and they have advanced knowledge in those specific areas. Packaging design, for example, requires a lot of knowledge about fold lines, barcodes, and other things that are specific to packaging. I would sometimes get packaging design jobs when I first started out on Upwork, but I stopped doing them because I didn't feel confident in my abilities to give a good product to the client. Because I wasn't very experienced with packaging design, I never knew if I was doing things right. But oftentimes to a client, a designer is just a designer and they don't think about that. So by having details about exactly what you need done, you'll attract the designers that know how to do it. Experienced designers might skip over your listing if you're not specific about what you need. That leads me to the next subject, reviewing your applicants. Real quick though, before I move on to reviewing applicants, if you have any questions about what I've covered so far or any questions about hiring a designer in general, leave them in the comments and I would love to answer those questions for you. And if you aren't subscribed to our channel yet, hit that subscribe button and the bell so you don't miss out on any of our new videos. Okay, so back to reviewing your applicants. Don't just review your applicant's proposal, you also need to review their profile. So when you submit a job, people will apply for that and you get proposals, but then you can also go further and look at the profile. Check their experience to see if they've actually done a job like yours. If you need packaging design, for example, find a designer that does a lot of packaging design. You also need to look at their work to see if the style of their work looks like what you're envisioning for your project and your brand. If it doesn't look like what you're envisioning, you should not work with that designer. From my personal experience as a designer on Upwork, this is the most frustrating thing that I came across. I would get hired for a job, send the artwork to the client, and then it would be nothing like what they wanted. Even after multiple revision rounds, it still was not what they wanted. And what it came down to is that the clients didn't look at my portfolio to see what my work looks like before they hired me for the job. So then, in that case, the project either has to be finished with the designer being unhappy or the client being unhappy. Either way, there are usually bad reviews from those jobs, which you don't want because that can help or harm you from getting good jobs in the future. So reviews are the next thing you should look at on your designer's profile. If they're bad, you may not want to work with that designer. You can also see the type of jobs that the designer has worked with in this review area, and that's where you can see if they've worked on similar projects to yours. Now you might think, shouldn't I just ask them if they're qualified for this job? Well, you can ask, but don't take their word for it. Always check up on the designer's profile just to make sure that they are as good as they make themselves out to be. There are big differences between design for print, design for web, design for apps, design for packaging, and logo design. There are even more types of design than that, so just because someone is a designer does not mean that they are a fit for your needs. There's also many levels of designers within each of those categories as well. Besides the type of design, the style of design varies widely too. So always make sure that the designer you choose is experienced with whatever it is that you need help with. Once you choose one or a few applicants that you think will work out, chat with them in the messenger or on a call to discuss the project. Make sure you're on the same page about things. Get a timeline, discuss the price and the final deliverables, check to see what files you'll receive. Will you get a print-ready file or the source file? Usually, designers charge more if you want the source files, which are the files that are editable. You should also ask your designer what software they use. Adobe is the standard for professional designers. InDesign is typically used for layouts like posters and publications. Illustrator is used for logos, illustrations, or graphics, and Photoshop is used for photos. If the designer is using a different program, I would proceed with caution because they may not really know what they're doing. A college degree isn't necessary to be a designer, but there are some self-taught designers who don't always catch everything that they should know. Here are a few things to look out for when you're hiring a designer on Upwork. If you're having a logo designed, it should be a vector graphic. Typically, Adobe Illustrator is the program that designers use to create vector logos. If your logo is not a vector graphic, it may get pixelated when you print it out or use it at a larger scale. Another problem I see often from rookie designers is that they design layouts in Photoshop. And this is bad. Photoshop is intended for photos, but it does have some basic functions for layout and text. I've designed postcards for photographers in Photoshop, but that only makes sense because they're already using this program to edit their photos, so they can also use the program to make updates to the small amount of text that are on their photo cards, or on their postcards. But in these cases, 75% or more of the postcard is just a photo. They have just small amounts of text, so that's when it's okay to use Photoshop for a layout. Typically though, layouts should be done in InDesign or even Illustrator would be better than Photoshop. InDesign's much easier to move things around and it's way faster. Also, if you do get the source files, which would be Adobe InDesign, Illustrator, or Photoshop, a new designer you work with in the future may just say no to your Photoshop files and they may not work on them. When I was still doing design, I got to the point where I straight up would not touch someone else's files if the layout was done in Photoshop. It's just so much more complicated and it just to use the other programs. They're better for it. So watch out for any designer who uses Photoshop for logos or for layouts. Now, there are certain instances where Photoshop really does need to be used if you're doing a lot of like layering images and stuff like that in like a poster or something. So it's not always bad, but For the most part, I would just say, avoid people who use Photoshop for layouts and logos. And my final tip for hiring a designer is to trust your gut. If you feel bad vibes about a person, keep looking. As a freelancer, when I felt bad vibes about a client, I ignored them, just thinking about the money, and ended up regretting that decision later. The clients I had bad feelings about were super needy, they didn't like anything I did, they were terrible at getting back to me, or they were just straight up crazy. Like, I had to block them from my phone and my email crazy. Which brings me to another important tip. Keep everything on Upwork, because then you have Upwork's protection. If you take things over to your personal email and to a personal phone, Upwork doesn't have proof of the crazy stuff that went down. Also, you don't have the payment protection that Upwork offers if you keep things on their platform. So I just recommend keeping all your communication on Upwork. They make it really easy with a messenger, and you can even do voice or video calls through there as well. If you're already on Upwork and have had bad experiences hiring designers, I would love to hear about it, and I think the other people watching this video would like to hear about it too. So tell us about your experience in the comments so we can all learn from it. So to recap, to hire a good designer, you want to write a good job post with just the right amount of detail, not too much, not too little. Use proper grammar and punctuation, and include visual examples of what you're picturing for your design. Then you want to review the applicants thoroughly by looking at their portfolio of work, reviews, and previous jobs to make sure they've worked on a similar project. Next, you'll talk to your potential designers to discuss the project, get a timeline, see what files you receive, and figure out what programs your designer will use. Adobe InDesign, Illustrator, and Photoshop are good, but Photoshop should only be used for things that are almost all photos, so no layouts or designs. If you're having a logo designed, you want it to be a vector graphic. And finally, trust your gut, because a bad project can get you a bad review and make it harder for you to hire good designers in the future. If you have any questions, ask them in the comments. Give us a thumbs up if you found this video helpful. Also hit subscribe and the bell so you don't miss out on any of our new videos. And if you want even more helpful advice, join our email list and follow us on Instagram. The links for all of that is in the description. Thanks for watching, and I hope to talk to you again soon.